Welcome to the Pod Cultcast, where we talk about life, love, learning, and libido, and share our journey through polyamory and kink. I am Erik.
Hi, I'm Chasten.
I'm Hannah.
I'm Max, butler to the poor, servant to the great.
And this is a podcast where we talk about love and relationships, sex and kink, and polyamory issues, and whatever else comes up. While we talk about those things, we'll probably also touch on stuff like abuse and violence and mental health challenges. And these can be difficult topics for some people, so keep that in mind continuing forward.
Yeah, you do that better than I do.
We all do everything equally as well.
Better than I do.
Yes, we all do everything better than Erik does.
We all do. Well, Erik smokes and he knows different things. This is who he is.
Theme song, Cultcast. It's a Cultcast. It's about cults.
And pop
And casts.
and cows, because I want it to be. Today, we are continuing in our first 4-episode series, I guess, I don't know, where we kind of tell our origin stories and just talk about who we are. So far we've talked to me, Chasten, we've talked to Max and Hannah about sort of how we got to where we are today, and now we want to make sure we check in on our last but certainly not least, newest member of the pod,
Maybe
Erik.
least.
You're not least. You're not most, but you're least. You're not
most
least.
self-deprecating.
Most that's true. That's true. This man cannot take a compliment. That is it's a skill set, really. The level to which he cannot take a compliment.
I can. I choose to not.
Okay, well, all right. Hey, Erik, how you doing?
Doing all right. How's everybody doing?
We're doing great.
Yeah, it's been a long time since the last one.
Yeah.
I hope I could keep up the energy.
A whole 5 minutes since our last episode recorded. But when you're listening to this, it's on Tuesday. We release episodes every Tuesday. You can catch us on all of the major podcast distributing website things. And if you do happen to listen to us, we'd appreciate a great review. And you can check us out on podcultcast.com.
That's cult with a V.
Thank you so much, Max. In previous episodes, we've all been talking about how we got here. So, Erik, how did you get here?
I took 64 East.
Let's not give people directions to the house now.
It's a general one.
Okay.
How did I get here? It's a long and winding road of most other people do. I guess, as far as anything non-monogamous is concerned, I am by far the newbie. I was a serial monogamist, I guess, to use that phrase, but not in I date this person and then I date that person. I didn't really date people either. And that relationship would last for years. And then it would stop, and then I would have years on my own, and then I'd stumble into another relationship that would last for years, and that would end, and then get the idea. Mm-hmm. Upon deciding that was really not so much a sustainable model for my own happiness and well-being, I happened to run across you there, Chasten.
Oh, hi.
And you crystallized, essentially, a lot of the things that I had already been thinking.
Such as?
Well, the monogamy side of things didn't seem to work so well for me. Not because of other people, due to my own weird view on the world. So I'll go back in time. The way that I viewed everything when I was younger was quite storybook. Storybook in the sense I would find my one person, and that was the end all. And a couple times I found that would get comfortable and complacent and such that, oh, look, it drifted away, because that doesn't work. What does seem to work a little better is looking at things that way.
So how do you look at things now?
Now it's not so much about trying to be something for another person and then making myself unhappy through it. It is more to do with being what I need to be for whoever is around me at the time. Now that branches over not just for romantic relationships or anything like that, but just in general in talking to people and my general interactions in day-to-day life.
Do you feel like you are more yourself now in relationships? In our relationship?
100%, yes.
That's good. That's a strong place to be.
Yeah.
Erik and I met on Tinder. I was out of a relationship. I've been dating a couple. Erik and I met and started talking, and I mentioned this last episode. I asked him about woodwork that he had on his Tinder profile, and he asked me about polyamory, and we had some pretty great discussions by a text message prior to actually meeting in person. And you asked me a lot of really great questions about my outlook on polyamory. I always try to, give my take, but also go like, well, this is what I know is sort of universally true, and then here's how I adapt that to my life. And you put up with that. and embraced it.
That put up with it might be a little more of a negative connotation than
I'm kidding.
You make it sound. No, you were just, as I said, you were kind of crystallizing ideas that were already kicking around through my head. I just didn't know that was how people were at all, because I exposed myself to.
You were familiar with the concept of polyamory.
I was not.
Okay, so it was just...
Or at least I was not in the sense that, finger quote, normal people would do.
Right. And we know that there's no such thing as normal.
Well, I knew that as well, but what I mean is that was something that, as far as my knowledge, and was on the periphery of people, kind of freaky.
What are the things that are different in our relationship and how we communicate than prior monogamous relationships you've had?
Boundaries. I'd say boundaries, because there would be a whole set of things that I was expected to be in prior relationships that with you and I don't really a focus on the relationship at all. In other words, I could say, there is more focus on the things that we share or agree upon, and the things that we don't necessarily agree upon or are viewed differently aren't a point of contention so much as they are, that's a different perspective. And that's cool.
When you and I have what I consider to be tense moments, you always come back and say, well, we're just having a discussion. We're just talking right now. This is a discussion. This is a conversation, as opposed to conflict. And that's something that I've really valued about our relationship. Max and I have been married, it'll be 11 years next month. And something that Max, you and I have really struggled with is managing our conflicts and coming to different viewpoints and respecting the other person's viewpoint as a perspective that doesn't necessarily change how we feel about a thing. Erik, with you and I think that because of where I am in my self-development and the things that I learned through my relationship with Max and my relationship with Hannah and my relationship with just other people in general and my ability to set boundaries, I think that something that you and I really benefit from is almost on a level of emotional maturity that I haven't had in prior relationships, that I've been able to flourish within with you. That has been a new experience for me. So I know that
for me as well, my desire to shoot for that sort of goal comes from, in the past, in the end-all be-all relationships, any kind of tiff would very easily just blow up into existential relationship arguments over, like where to have dinner. And that's just needlessly stressful.
It is stressful. It's really stressful. And you do a good job of accepting the fact that I'm a planner and you're not.
I am not a planner.
You are not a planner. So you sort of let me take the reins in a lot of ways. But when I say, hey, I don't have the energy for this or don't have the emotional space for this, you are really good at going, okay, well, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to go forward. I think we have a good dynamic there. So in terms of polyamory or kink or anything, what would you say has been the most surprising thing about just coming into the world of polyamory and meeting all the people you've met?
That there, regardless of background or whatever particular specific differences in what people are into or whatever, there's a fairly strong common theme in everybody that I've met, that they're, just trying to be people. And that's very appealing.
Yeah. Are you out as polyamorous?
It depends.
Okay.
Depends on who you're talking about or who you're talking to. Like, for instance, my parents, I don't really share any of this with because I don't need to. With work, I work in a very blue-collar sort of environment where there is the tendency to either really, really, really frown upon such a dynamic, relationship dynamics with people, or just the opposite. They're envious and jealous and they want to know every detail about it that they don't necessarily understand anyway. They just think, oh man, more chicks? That's awesome.
That's true.
They're basically in a blue collar work environment, 9 times out of 10 they're just not going to get what they're talking about.
Yeah.
It's not that they're not capable of it.
They don't have the background.
Right. They're just not there right now.
Max, you also, work in a similar, work with your hands and work with making stuff.
Right.
In your experience, not to pull focus away from Erik, but just to...
there's a lot of overlap.
Yeah, a lot of overlap with you too. I have a type. What's been your experience and just sort of managing different levels of outness, especially with work?
with work people, the older guys, the more conservative guys, the more hardcore Baptist kind of cats, like, I don't talk about my relationships and stuff. And at this point, with Hannah and I having been together for 3 years and Chastity and I having been together for 10 years, if I want to tell an anecdote, it's usually merged into you two are kind of one person, you know?
Yeah, you just don't speak in specifics.
Right.
Yeah. If some of the younger guys and guys that I feel like can handle it, frankly, I will get to a point with them where just in conversation, talking at work, I want to either tell an anecdote about another partner besides Chasten, or, you know, tell a funny story about a weird thing that happened on a date or something like that. And I always go like, all right, I want to tell you the story, but here are the 5 things you need to know first.
Oh, what are the 5 things?
Well, I mean, I'm just, whatever.
Oh, no, I'm super excited.
No,
about this.
I mean,
What
I
is-
didn't, it was just a number.
Figurative
It's
5
fine.
things. Is that
Damn it.
You know,
You guys are no fun.
and so most of the time that has been met with, okay, man, that's cool. And that's pretty much the end of it. The rest of the time it's like, yeah, you get to bang all these broads? Like,
Yeah,
kind
there's a
of.
bit of that.
Like,
No,
sometimes.
bit of that conversationally not banging
Yeah.
lots of broads.
I mean, I'm doing fine.
Yeah. Like, yeah. But that's not the point of the story I wanted to tell here. I just wanted to talk about how, you know, my partner gave me a free ticket to King's Dominion. You know, it's that kind of stuff. But, yeah, I haven't met any flack about it because I'm careful about
Yeah.
who I talk
Exactly.
to about it.
Yes.
I just know that the Baptists won't be able to handle it.
Yeah.
Actually, I remember quite well the first conversation that I ever had with you, Max.
Yeah, I do.
was,
I do too.
asking you specifically about this topic
Yeah. At the club.
at the club.
At the club. Yeah, so to put some things into perspective in terms of outness and things like that. So, Eric, basically you're saying that you're out to say friends.
I'm out to people that I comfortably determine
So selectively.
can handle
selectively
what
out.
I have to say.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, in general, how I would say that I talk about most things that I talk about
Oh,
anyway.
right.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah.
sure.
It's-
Because I'm that weird guy that'll spout off things for half an hour to look back at a blank face that they stopped listening because they don't know what an everyday thing.
What are you talking about?
See?
So Max, you're out with family at this point, right?
I
The
mean,
family you care about.
well, I don't, you, obviously, you know.
I do
I know
know.
this isn't for you. This is for listeners. I mean, I don't have a lot of close family.
Right, neither do I.
Neither
You know,
do
my
I.
parents
Actually,
are-
really, kind of none of us do we?
Yeah, I have my sister. We're close.
Hannah
That's
does.
it. Hannah's close with her family.
Hannah, the one who was shunned from her family.
Yeah.
is the
No,
one
but
You
that
have
because
to
we
understand
came
the
from-
degrees
Hannah
of
is
closeness
nice.
we had to like remove to get here is dramatic to me,
Yeah.
even me alone.
Right. But, you know, both my parents are deceased. I have the one sibling. And, you know, I come from I think we're probably going to talk about family of origin a little bit more, so I'll just kind of drop it there. But I wrote, once I was in a relationship that was 6 or 8 months long, I had set myself this kind of artificial deadline that once I'm in a long-term-ish relationship outside of Chasten, I'm going to come out to my sister. And then I like moved that deadline back a couple times.
That's really easy to do.
And once I finally like hit, you know, wasn't moving it back again, I wrote her this long email and like explained sort of the history of the conversations Chasten and I had since we met and the values we shared. And Chasten talked about there was a young woman that we were dating at the time that we got married. Mm-hmm. I'll call her Sarah for the sake of having something Sarah to call her because it matters in this anecdote. But so I wrote this long, overly explanatory email to my sister, and essentially the response was like, yeah, me and Mom figured it out when Sarah was around all the time, so just fucking relax, dude.
Yeah.
Was essentially the response.
Yeah.
So that's it. Like I am out-ish to my sister, and
And we're out to our son. Our son's
Oh,
known
yeah,
since
yeah.
for a long time.
I think he gets it better than all of us.
Yeah, he's a good, yeah.
we actually had the conversation with him.
He's 13.
Yeah, before I said I talked to my sister because we had another young woman who was around all the time. And the first one that I was talking about was like his first crush.
Yeah, he
It was
had
a very
he had a crush on our sort of serious girlfriend at the time. He was about 8 to 10 when we were dating her. And so when we talked to my son, who's now 19, he's just moved out of the house. And when we talked to him, he goes like, the funny thing was, so Max and I were going to polyamory meetings and potlucks and things like that. And my son was worried that we were in marital counseling at that time because he thought we were getting a divorce. And it turns out, no, we were just like trying to improve our relationship through
quite the opposite.
dating.
We're adding more people.
Yeah, exactly. Like more the merrier.
We're
So
not subtracting. We're
and when
multiplying.
we came out to him and we sat down and had that conversation, he said, I respect that. I don't think I'm that way. I don't think I'm polyamorous, but
Yeah.
I respect that you guys, and I respect you.
So he would have been in 8th or 9th grade.
Yeah.
And it was interesting to me that at that time, he knew queer kids. He knew, like, one of his best friends
Yeah.
identified as bi. Like, we didn't have to explain what any of the terminology was, which is so vastly different.
Right.
Oh yeah, that wasn't in school.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
wasn't the school I
Yeah,
went to.
I was, I remember there were girls in the theater stuff that we did who happened to be in high school too, and two girls kissed me when I was in high school. One of them did it secretly in the basement, and the other one said, "Don't worry, Chastin, I won't tell. Don't want to ruin your reputation." I was called a dyke all throughout high school just because I was kind of a weirdo. But I mean, I really was a dyke, so I mean, it made sense. But at the time, it was very awful. So when our son came out as bisexual and as sort of gender fluid-y, he didn't really come out. He just sort of was like, "Oh yeah, this is who I am."
Right.
And I wanted to have the celebratory coming out because I had never done the coming out. I'd never come out to my family. I'd never gone like, I'm queer and I'm poly and this is all the things. Like, instead it was just like, he was just like, yeah, this is just who I am. Like, I don't need to celebrate that. Like, it's not a special thing that I am who I am. I am a special person, but that doesn't make it a special thing. And I thought that was beautiful.
Yeah, and it's
That wasn't a big
inspirational.
deal.
In that sense, that's why I haven't really bothered to come to other people.
Because why does it matter? Who the fuck cares?
It doesn't
Yeah.
matter. Now, that said, I do have a bit of a chosen family that is not my family that they know.
Right. Your best friend.
And his whole family and all of that. And because it's not just his wife also knows.
Right, right.
They.
She like guys with tattoos or what?
Well,
I mean,
so when we had been dating for about 6 months when I think that you finally pulled the plug on declaring that we were a thing to your best friend. And I think you described me, you talked about me to him as your dominatrix at the time.
No. Not mine.
Well, you said my dominatrix, and that was funny.
You were and are still referred to as the dom.
Okay.
Because it's humorous.
It is humorous.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, well, that's come out to people like that because they know me and my own peculiarities well enough to understand coming from.
Hannah, you are out to friends. You're kind of out at work now. And a little bit.
You outed yourself
Yeah.
at your graduation.
Well, and here's the thing, I
People are
only
starting to
invited
put pieces
people.
together.
Right.
Yeah.
I only invited people that I knew would be cool.
Yeah.
And I've been there for a while, so they already knew me and understood my character as a person. I was really nervous when I started at this office. It seemed like a conservative place. It seemed like I would be like drawing too much attention or putting myself forward in some way if I talked about my personal life at all. So I think just like anywhere else, people don't see what they don't want to see.
This is so true.
Agreed.
So I just let them not see until they ask me about it. And whenever someone asks me directly, I try to provide them a direct answer. And pretty much in every context, the feedback that I get is, oh, I could never share, which kind of catapults me into like a morally superior place. Like, well, he doesn't belong to me, so I'm not sharing him with anybody.
I think that's actually a very valid point to bring up.
Yeah.
He's generously sharing his time with me and also other people.
Yeah.
But the most recent one that I got, I was asked a specific question. I provided a specific answer. They went into detail about like, and so, so like, and Max is Chastin's partner, right? But she also has another partner. And I was like, yes, you read the situation correctly. And she said, God love you. I can only handle one. Which was the most, like,
Well, no,
disarming, just like completely
to
delightful.
that end, actually, I think that's a lot of what I mean about it's less stressful. This in that you don't have to unload and project all of your bullshit onto one person. If you can spread it around a little bit, better for everybody.
Yeah, well, and I think that's not only true for polyamory. I think we'll probably spend some time talking about toxic monogamy and maybe toxic masculinity and toxic femininity in an episode in the future. I think that the ability to recognize that all relationships you have in your life, all interpersonal relationships, you should spread yourself around. That there is no one human being who can be all, end all for you, and it's not healthy to think that way, regardless of whether you're polyamorous, regardless, even if Max and I were monogamous, like if I had not developed the ability to lean on my friends emotionally and reach out and have a support network, and if I was just trying to expect him to fulfill all those emotional needs, we would not be here today. We would have divorced a long time ago.
Well, and to return to a theme of like troubling things and Tinder bios, not just relationship people, but like you'll see, I have a son and he's my whole world. Like if you make anything your whole world, like
world is
that's
gonna
not
crash.
healthy, dude.
No.
Like,
That might even be the most common phrase that I've seen on Tinder.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm a bit my whole world. Well, great. I don't need to.
which
talk
is
to
also
you. It's not
just a cliche Pat thing that
sure
doesn't necessarily have any meaning, but
that's also true.
But you know what? I think, and this is not a conversation for now, but I'm going to say it anyway because I feel like it. I think that not being precise with your words and not being specific with your words and not speaking in meaningful ways is a lot of the problem with society we have as a whole.
Amen.
That's what I'm going to say about that. So, I'm going to bring this up because it's going to come up all the time. I'm a big fan of the book, The Four Agreements, and Hannah mentioned some really great books in our last episode, which are in the show notes for episode 2, and you can find that at podcultcast.com.
it's called with a V.
Cult with a V, and some really great resources for people who are kind of coming out of an evangelical world. There's a great resource that was actually recommended by the marital counselor, family counselor that Max and I saw together for a while. That is called The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. And the four agreements are to be impeccable with your word, to not take things personally, to not make assumptions, and to always do your best. And the first one, to be impeccable with your word, means to speak from the heart and speak truthfully, and to do otherwise is to fail to honor yourself. And if you check out the book, I'll definitely put a link to it in the show notes for this episode. If you check out the book, it does come across as a little preachy. It does have some religious overtones and it is written from a Christian point of view. However, in the mentions in the book about God, if you think about yourself as the God of your world and just think about speaking to honor yourself and speaking to honor others and speaking truthfully and from a place of compassion and giving, it makes life a lot easier. Because, well, one, it's important to me because I don't really deal with indirect conversation well. I'm not a small talk kind of girl. I'm very neuroatypical, so it helped me out. So, yeah, I think speaking meaningfully is important. Mm-hmm. So, Erik, a minute ago you were talking about, and sort of talking about this, you said that something was the point of, and we were talking about friends and talking to friends and sharing information and closeness, and I'm trying to get back to the thing where we sort of branched off. It was when Hannah was talking about work relationships and people's perceptions.
Oh, wait, what was...
That's what I'm asking you. You said that there was a point.
No, that people really only see what they're gonna see anyway.
Right.
That was something valid because we did have that experience not all that long ago.
We did.
Where we were all, as a pod, out for a weekend in a rather conservative environment, and the whole time I was thinking, well, how are we supposed to present this to the other people here? And nobody else really seemed to be worried about it but me.
So, Erik is talking about us going and doing a volunteer weekend at an Episcopal retreat center that's been important to my life that I mentioned in the last episode, Shrimont. and you go up for a weekend and you volunteer your time and service and talent to help them open the retreat center for the season by painting repairs. And we all worked on church benches. We stained and cleaned up church benches. And Max and Erik rode around on a truck and distributed porch chairs, sold up at different houses. And so we were there with a bunch of like old Episcopalian people. We were some of the youngest people there, and when you're there,
the youngest people, not children.
Yeah, we were the young, that were not children or dogs. We stayed in a house, and we shared a house with this other couple, and Erik and I stayed in a room together, and Max and Hannah stayed in a room together. But Max and I introduced each other as our husband and wives, and Erik and I were snuggled up on the couch together in the conversations, and Max and Hannah were canoodling. And I mean, it was to us, it was very obvious that like Erik and I were together, and Max and Hannah were together, but also Max and I were together. Nobody else even figured it out. Nobody noticed. Nobody said anything. If they did, they didn't come to us and say anything.
Well, the point being that I thought it was going to be an issue.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about this when you were telling your story, Chaston, about that place in particular, but other experiences that we've had going there, I've watched other people, other married couples, and the way we are with each other publicly isn't really that different from how a lot of those people are. You see, the couple with the single male friend who's with them, and they're all very close, and it outwardly doesn't look very strange unless we're Frenching,
exactly.
on the front porch.
Well, and even then, I mean, you think about just society as a whole. You think about, I think a lot about house parties and the conversations that people who are not polyamorous or have not done swinging or are not kinky, where I'm like, yeah, I went to a sexy party. There were naked people there. Yeah, we had sex in front of people. It was fine, whatever. When they go like, oh my gosh, well, like, once we got really tipsy on margaritas and got into a hot tub with our couple friend naked, but nothing happened. But like, I was thinking about something happened, but that would never really happen in real life. And I think a lot about the fact, like, well, it can happen in real life. If you want it, just do it. But there's a large portion of society where it's like this cutoff. Right. Like, oh, well, it's not normal or okay, so we're just going to stop ourselves. And like, fuck it, I'm just going to live my life.
Similar phrases have been used a couple times too, like, oh, I could never do that. Well, you literally could. Like, it's that you could give it a shot.
That and burlesque shows. Anytime I talk about going to a burlesque show, people are like, oh my gosh, like that sounds so crazy. I'd love to do that. Like, okay, well, here's the website. Go buy a ticket.
Well, not with respect to burlesque shows. Any sort of problem with that. But it wasn't that long ago that is exactly the view that I have. No, I couldn't. That's just not how things are supposed to work.
So what changed that for you?
You did.
Oh. Yeah, Erik and I can be gross too, y'all.
Okay. Cool.
I really come to hear that as like an affirmation, though. When if someone's initial like knee-jerk response is, "Well, I could never," that's them talking to themselves.
Right,
being like, "This doesn't have to be true in my life."
It's also them just straight up not considering more than no.
For me, all that comes back to the 4 agreements and being impeccable with your word. When you're impeccable with your word, you're speaking from your truth. You're not judging somebody else's truth. So when you speak about it, against it, you're really just expressing your insecurity. To say, I couldn't do that just means that you're insecure about it. Sorry.
Yes, with no sense of permanence either. I mean,
right.
It's also valid to say, who's to say that a few years down the road and a few blah, you can do that, which I guess is ultimately where I'm at right now. Yeah.
How do you sort of define our relationship and stuff?
In a lot of ways, it's not all that different from a monogamous relationship.
Right.
Only you also are pretty good at finding some chicks.
You call me a good wingman.
Yeah, well, you're much, much, much better at an initial interaction with somebody than I am.
It's just boobs. It's boob constant.
Yeah, confidence. I don't have that.
If you feel comfortable, can we talk about the experience that happened last year, I guess? Last April.
Fire away.
Last April when I was at yoga. It was right before I went to yoga weekend, and my long-term friend and I, the 3 of us, had an experience.
You're talking about my first threesome.
Your first threesome, yes. Yeah. You and I did a lot of emotional processing that weekend and a lot of talking about our relationship and just how we felt about ourselves in that time. Mm-hmm. Can you share a little bit of what was sort of going through your mind at that time?
Yes, with maybe another couple of pointed questions, because
Sure.
that is very broad.
Leading up to it, what were your thoughts and fears?
I didn't really have any fears. My thoughts were mostly, hell yeah.
Wait. I want to know, like, go back. I want to know how we got from, oh, I could never, to hell yeah. Like,
Because it was, well, prior to meeting her, it was, oh, I couldn't do that. I wouldn't know where to begin. To, this is several months later, with a couple of experiences and eye-opening events and stuff like that.
He's talking about sex parties, folks. Like,
okay.
he's
Yeah,
talking
that
about
was
me
all new to me.
dragging him to sex parties. That's what that is.
And but that's what they were, and there were some bits of play and all that sort of thing. But I had never had a full-fledged sexual experience with multiple people, more than one person, and this was something that was essentially just gift wrapped for me. So I thought that was pretty sweet.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome.
To make it sound like we're not unicorn hunters, because I really do consider us ethical unicorn hunters. You know, unicorn hunting is an unethical practice of wrangling women or men or whomever to join a couple for sex or relationships or whatever, and not really giving that person agency or considering their thoughts and feelings on the matter. So this was a situation where this was a friend that I had for a long time, a number of years, and we were very, very close. And I already had sort of a flirty dynamic, and there was already interest there. She was experiencing some things in her life where she really needed some physical attention, so we talked about it and negotiated, and there were conversations leading up to this. And it wasn't just
between
like
the two of you.
Between the two of us, yeah. Between the two of us, where we did a lot of checking in and stuff, and we said, well, we were just going to get dinner and hang out anyway, and then we'll see what happens. And if shit happens, shit happens. If it doesn't, that's fine too. But we can always just enjoy each other's company. So that happened, and it was a consensual experience, and I think it worked out well for everybody. Everybody seemed to have their needs met and be heard. And when boundaries were pushed, like, we honored boundaries, and I think we did a good job there.
Yes.
But then the next day, I was out of town because I was at a yoga thing, and you and I were just frenzy texting each other about what things meant and how we felt and yada yada yada, because you were going to a skating competition, and we were to watch a skating competition, and we were just like sort of talking about it sort of nonstop and processing nonstop. It was a good 48 hours of us processing while I'm trying to have this meditative mountain experience, while you're trying to just live your life. And we're just like emotions.
Part of that, for that was I also the following morning had to go to work, and I was doing all of this on like 2 hours sleep.
Yeah.
Really, that's the most unhealthy part of the whole thing, was the lack of sleep.
That's just unnatural.
You've heard it here, everybody. Like, if you have threesomes, try to plan them early in the evening, or any kind of sexual experience. You want to get to bed by like 11.
At least when you've got a day off. I mean, you can fuck until dawn. Just...
You can.
All night, all night.
You just gotta have a cleared schedule.
Okay. That's our advice for you. But it seems that you were having a little bit of a crisis of self afterwards.
I certainly was.
Yeah.
I certainly was, and there's a lot in my background that goes into that. But you, in a previous episode, referenced historical feelings.
Yes.
And that's what most of that had to do with.
Yeah.
Most of my friends from long ago would say that I have a very, very, very specific type.
Yes.
And
I am not that type.
No. In fact, actually, many of them are like, wait a minute, what? But this nice lady that you brought around to my place was exactly that type. And that kind of fucked me up in the head for a little bit, because I was trying to reconcile the way that I currently thought and felt about things with the resurrection of the time-honored, ingrained, this is how I view interactions and women, hence frenzy texting.
You know, a thing that I find a little bit amusing about our relationship just with each other is that when we've had the serious conversations are very quickly resolved. it's usually, hey, can we talk about this thing? Yes. Okay, now we talk about this thing, and we're both like, oh, we're on the same page anyway. We just need to check in that we were on the same page, and then we're done. So when I first went, like, are we a thing? You were like, yeah, and I was like, okay, cool. And then when the threesome happened, and we were having all sorts of things like that, I was like, I have feelings for you, and I feel vulnerable, and I'm not good at opening up, blah, 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 but I'm just going to put it out there, and you're like, cool.
Yeah, hey, me too.
Yeah, and when I was in like, both of us have been just sort of like, all right, here we are. It was last fall, I think. We were actually going out and meeting people together, but talking to people separately using Tinder. We play, Eric and I play what I call the swipey game, where we swipe through Tinder and then we share profiles with each other, and it's
either to laugh at them,
or go like, ooh, damn, them. Yeah.
But it's not always to mock, right? Sometimes you're swiping to meet people?
Sometimes we actually swipe to meet people.
Okay.
Yeah. So, we had an experience where there was somebody who was like, well, what if I just want to hang out with you? And I had sort of a record scratch moment in terms of feelings, and I was like, oh, wait, I don't think I'm ready for us to date separately. I mean, I'm married to Max and all, but like, I don't know that I feel like okay with
he don't matter
with Erik dating and going out and doing stuff alone. I felt really weirdly protective, and I have strong feelings about that. So that was a conversation we had to have. We had to have a check-in conversation. Mm-hmm. And I think both you and I were pretty scared at that point, because I was feeling like, I need to pull way back. I'm too invested in this relationship, and relationships aren't supposed to be investments. And I think just the fact that I wanted to have a serious conversation with you was freaking you the fuck out.
Well, yeah, because it was the most serious you had been about a conversation to that point.
Yeah. Yeah, it was important.
And then back to historical memories. In my experience, when there was that kind of tone set before word one was said, it was usually something bad, and it was usually something that I did.
But neither of us did anything wrong.
Well,
and we had a conversation, and the conversation was essentially like, well, okay, we're on the same page. Neither of us has the emotional space for another relationship.
Right.
But we like fucking people together.
Yes.
Yeah. So we are currently closed. We have a monogamish thing going on, but I still have my relationship with that. Mm-hmm. So to what Max says, to put a pen in it and say like how you got to where you are today, and where are you today? What is your life? What is your life and relationships and love and all that stuff look like for you right now?
I mostly just work, but when I'm not working, I like to hang out with you guys.
Yeah. Yay.
Yeah. The comfort that we've found that we don't put up with the same kind of bullshit.
Yeah.
In social settings.
Let me try and put it this way. Maybe we identify that we have support and skills and tools that come from our relationship with the four of us.
Yes. That
maybe other people don't have, and it makes us a little quicker to point out and to see red flags in those people.
Yes, and not that we must avoid those things. In fact, I think in a lot of ways it seems that...
I'm going to be honest, there are some red flags I run straight on towards.
Really? I hadn't ever seen that before.
Oh, I thought that was going to be a surprise.
No, where I was going with that is that I think also, maybe this is all of us to varying degrees, but we all seem to like to bring people along.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have much validity in saying this as I am myself the new one here, but people that are thinking and kind of leaning in this lifestyle direction, we seem to like to at least be open and talk to them about it in such a way that it doesn't have to be negative and it doesn't have to be stressful.
Yeah. I would say that there's no perfect way to practice anything. There's no perfect way to practice polyamory. Max, Hannah, you can disagree with me. When it comes to us, I think the four of us are pretty good stewards for healthy polyamorous relationship models. I think that, we've done a lot of learning and a lot of growing together, the four of us, and our individual relationships with one another. That's kind of one of the reasons I was like, hey, if people support us on Patreon, they can be a steward for our show.
If you're enjoying the Pod Cultcast, you can thank our Patreon subscribers, Jenny and Sydney. They've made our theme music possible. To thank them, we'll be sending them some sweet Pod swag and give them access to exclusive content. If you'd like to be awesome like Jenny and Sydney, head over to www.patreon.com/podpodcultcast, that's cult with a V, and choose your subscription level. Each level comes with its own fun perks. Thank you so much, Jenny and Sydney.
Maybe Eric, tell me, maybe this is what you're driving at. I think that we tend to, we are weird people, each in our own ways, and we have weird interests and interact with the world kind of differently. But I think we do see ourselves as like polynormal, polyamnormal. And I think that when we're at a potluck or a meetup night or whatever, like we do identify other people that we go like, oh, you're just like a person. You should come talk to us. Like,
right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. We have this really great group of friends that are sort of doing stuff in mostly healthy ways and learning and growing. Come along and hang out with us. And but we're not cool. We're not cool in any way, shape, or form. We are the least cool people. I am currently holding a pink stuffed octopus because I can't stop, fidgeting and stuff. So there's no thing cool. There's no cool thing here.
No, what I mean is that I have, in my limited experience, seen a lot of people that want to move in this direction as far as a lifestyle. It's very easy to just see what you see out there and then go in that direction without necessarily any regard to whether that's a healthy or unhealthy decision to make. Yeah. Because it's easy, I think, to also lose yourself in the excitement of this new thing.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, we definitely see people who kind of go ape shit, at the possibilities at first.
Yeah.
And then get lost,
It's a good feeling to be like, hey, I see where you're at with this, but it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why don't you just calm down a little bit.
Yeah, pump the brakes.
Knowledge should be shared. Like, hey, I had to push a couple rocks up this mountain. Like, these rocks are already here, so let me tell you about my journey, and the path will be easier for you.
There's no need to be Sisyphus over here.
Right, exactly. If we can go back and just kind of switch gears just a little bit, Eric, I wanted to touch on the fact that, you said your dad's a biker, your mom's a hippie.
And I am neither.
But... like my mom was kind of a hippie too. Bikers, you get a lot of sort of loyalty culture. So, your parents' relationship and the home that you grew up in, how do you think that influenced how you're viewing polyamory now? Do you look at the relationship that we have and the four of us have as sort of family, quote unquote, differently as your relationship with your family,
Very much so. Because as we are currently sitting all in one room right now in a home, that is not very much the home that I grew up in.
What was your home like?
Well, there were my parents, there's me, and there's my sister, my younger sister. And for most of the time growing up, everybody had their own agenda. We were all in different directions. And we were four people that lived in the same house that rarely had anything to do with each other. Mm-hmm. So, in that sense, as far as a close familial feeling, have never had that apart from a chosen. That's only something that came about after high school into college, where I was choosing a different set of people that I was being around all the time.
Yeah.
Because I was in a different setting.
Yeah. Well, and I know that you consider your best friend to be basically a brother.
Yes.
You're very close with their family. And, I hope you have familial families with us. Since you're part of this family, whether you want to be or not.
Yes, all of that is much more of a family feel than my actual family. And that's fine. In fact, actually, through that, I've learned to be closer to my actual family.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. It's way different now than what it was when I was growing up.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. Hannah, last episode we talked about, your journey coming up through polyamory. Same question to you, like given your background and how you view family and family being important to you, what from that background has fed into the life that you lead now, or what's different? Yeah, I think that's it. I think that's the question.
Yeah. So it sounds like my experience is a big contrast from Eric's, because I was homeschooled with 3 siblings that were really close in age. We were together all the time. We did everything together. Being alike and being a unit was very important growing up. So whenever I got into the throes of like adolescent rebellion, adolescent sexual awakening, whatever, 15 to 17, which were guaranteed to be tough years regardless, they felt even more especially difficult because I lost some of that closeness and that open communication that I had had with my parents up until that time. And I really felt the loss of that incredibly deeply. Was angry, and my dad was going through health issues at that time. So it was sort of like our different ways of managing anxiety and depression were clashing, and we couldn't get past it. And so those were the years where I decided, like, look, every couple, right? Like every husband-wife unit is really just an island to themselves. Like, ultimately, they only care about each other, and that's fine. That's the way the world is. So I have to go out and find somebody who's going to be my forever and only person. Right. And that really shaped how I move forward. So breaking out of that into polyamory was kind of just like a glass shattering. If you have something that is that rigid of an idea and it doesn't work out, you just have pieces. Like, you just have to start over. So that was challenging, but I think in some ways it gave me that freedom to say, look, I tried the thing. That wasn't the thing for me. I need something completely different than what I was led to expect.
Actually, it was, I could say pretty well exactly the same thing.
Yeah, I was going to say
from a completely different direction.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that you had this idea of sort of this cookie cutter. Like, I have to be this for this person because this is what they want me to be.
Yeah, and also the
them.
respective opposite.
Right.
It's like, no, this is what you're supposed to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Max, what about you? Same kind of question. Your family model growing up, how has that contributed to or detracted from your life now and your chosen family?
Well, my folks were high school sweethearts. They got married the day after my dad graduated high school. They were together until my mother died 10 years ago, and were like incredibly loving, held hands the whole time, all that kind of stuff. But by and large, they really kind of did their own thing. Dad had his little projects. My uncle's drag raced and circle track raced and tractor pulled. So he was always off doing that stuff, and Mom found her projects or whatever to fill her time, and then they would come back together, and then they'd be off kind of doing their own thing. And I think that modeled what like adult relationships were for me. Like, everybody's just kind of out there doing their own thing, man. And you care about the people that you love and you take care of them, but you're also still your own person. You also still do your own thing. And we had, even though we weren't like strong family people, we still took big family trips with cousins and aunts and uncles and stuff, and we still had Labor Day cookouts with cousins and aunts and uncles and stuff. So the idea of a large family, whether it's a chosen family or a family of origin, has been appealing to me, because it's, you've got a lot of people around to, either to be kids with or to stand around and drink beer with. Those are things that I've carried into adulthood, like the idea of being able to do your own thing while still being in strong relationships, and also having access to large family groups without being obligated to do that all the time also. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Max, this is actually a point of struggle for you and I in our relationship. The idea that we're living sort of separately together. And I think you and I talked about that as sort of the goal. Mm-hmm. But I had a hard time executing it because I didn't really have a model for that.
Right. Sure.
And I struggled with that. I grew up with sort of both ends of all of you guys. Like, I had super close family things, but I also had a lot of distance from a lot of my family. So my young childhood was my mom getting divorced when I was 4, and I would spend summers with my dad and then go to my granny's, and we'd go to the mountains for a couple of weeks, and then I'd go back home, and I'd live with my single mom who was an alcoholic. And my mom would get married, but being married to a man always came across as, this is how I'm taking care of us. And my mom made some really bad choices in terms of who she married. And there were people who were, well, my stepfather was abusive, physically, emotionally, and sexually. And so that sort of shattered my idea of family. And so I come from this sort of picturesque holiday thing where we go to my granny's and everybody's dressed up and it's all very middle class. And then, we were eating food from boxes from his church because my abusive stepfather was not paying child support even though he'd adopted me, and there was all kinds of craziness. So my family model growing up was that my biological father didn't want me, my stepfather wanted me in a wrong way, and my mom was not a reliable parent, and there was a lot of parentification going on where I was the parent, and I was the responsible one, and I was the one to take care of shit. And so coming into that, getting pregnant at 19, when I hit adulthood, I just jumped into codependent relationships with other people because a codependent relationship was what I had had with my mother, and we were very close. I really re-victimized myself in a lot of ways and picked people with patterns of abuse that mimicked the things that I'd experienced already, because that's what I was like, well, you just put up with it if you love somebody. If you love somebody, you let them do this. Where I am now is so far removed from the life that I had growing up because I have safety and security, and I have people that check in on me. Friday night I was out for a drive and picking up some medication and stuff, and I got a text message from Hannah, my roommate in Metamore, my husband's girlfriend or partner, just asking if I was safe. And that was really sweet. It was a sense of home. And I was messaging with Erik and just going hey, I'm having kind of a rough evening, and you were being supportive and kind. And I feel like having a support network is something that I did not grow up with any kind of idea of. Mm-hmm. My mom didn't have she had female, one female best friend here and there, but for the most part, I didn't have friends growing up. I was just kind of a weird loner kid, and I had sisters, but they were my half sisters, and I was estranged from them for a decade. So, yeah. What we have now is some sort of magical fairyland version of life for me. And I used to really want to, just like Erik, you and Hannah, put relationships in a box and say okay, this is what a relationship looks like, and I have to act this way because if I don't, they'll leave me. I have to do these things to make people stay. Mm-hmm. And finally, I just stopped doing that and said, no, I need to be myself. And I need to be who I would want to love. Yeah.
In a lot of ways, that's what I did as well.
Yeah. I think one of the things, Erik, that really brought us together closely from the beginning was mindfulness. Us both having an understanding of the concept of mindfulness and thinking of it as being important in our lives. Having kind of an actual working knowledge and practice with that.
Sure.
Well, okay, maybe more so, but
yeah, because
but you
my
understanding.
Sense of mindfulness came from sports, not from anything else, really.
But it's still applicable.
Yes, it is.
It's absolutely.
It's actually really. I think the better way to say it is, it's the only way that I could know what you were talking about.
Yeah, but you did know what I was talking about, and that was, we're sitting there on our first date, sitting on the couch that you just moved into your apartment that day.
I just put the couch together.
You just put the couch together.
I was worried about it not actually being a functional couch by the time we got there. Because there was nothing else to sit on.
Yeah, and we started talking about mindfulness, and it was just that clicked because it was a similar worldview, and it felt safe and comfortable, mm-hmm. but not in an unhealthy, toxic way.
No.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to say about polyamory, or just...
No, not really, because I figure we'll have more episodes.
We will. And hopefully if you like what you're hearing, you can check us out at www.podpodcultcast.com.
Cult with a V.
And you can also follow us on Twitter at PodCultcast and Facebook at PodCultcast, as well as check out our Patreon. We've got some cool things going on over there, a little bit of extra content and some swag. If you want to support us, we appreciate it. Otherwise, just listening is enough for us, and we hope you have a really great week.
Also, go on Twitter if you like it and tell your friends, or
Holla
Reddit,
at us.
or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, share it with people.
Bye, shipmates.
You've just heard the Pod Cultcast with your hosts, Max, Chasten, Hannah, and Erik. Our theme song is Spencer Blues by Lobo Loco. Our break music is by Gobberino. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or your favorite podcast destination. Thanks for listening.